Chapter 1. The ones who came before the light, before the word Jedi ever scarred the air. Before temples were raised and laws were written in the name of peace. Before the lightsaber's hum replaced the silence of the stars, there was only the Force, unshaped, unwitnessed, and infinite, a storm of creation and destruction that breathed in the void between galaxies like a sleeping god with no name, no morality, and no end. It whispered not in words but in gravitational pools, in the birth of suns and the devouring mouths of black holes, and only those who were not yet fully flesh, the first dreamers, the first wanderers of the deep, could feel its tremble through their blood, a pulse older than their bones, older than their ancestors, older than the universe they believed they understood. These were not Jedi, they were not Sith. They were the ones who came before the light, primitive, luminous, and half-mad, pilgrims who abandoned language to study the breathing wound of the Force itself, building no temples, naming no gods, worshipping nothing but the great unknowable current that moved through all things, loving and destroying without care. They came from scattered worlds, lost now to time, not Tython, not Coruscant, not Moraband, but places that once danced close to the galactic core, where the Force sang louder, screamed brighter, and where the stars seemed to weep when observed by minds to open to remain whole, to touch the Force in its Roy's form was not a gift, it was a fire without source. And the earliest of the Force sensitives burned not with power, but with madness, becoming living conduits for a will that had no direction, no intention, no light and no shadow, only need. The first among them were known in forbidden texts as the anchors of flame beings who gave up identity, flesh, even voice, to allow the Force to pass through them freely, and when they spoke, the sky above them cracked, and when they died, new stars were born from their bones. But with time came division, as it always does, for among these early wanderers were those who feared the fire and sought to tame it, to control its chaos through ritual, silence, and meditation, and others who bowed to its fury and let passion fuel their connection, becoming weapons of wild instinct and vengeance. It was not yet light or dark. It was not yet Jedi or Sith, but it was the beginning, the first fracture in the mirror of the Force, and it echoed across time like a scream hidden in a lullaby. These factions would scatter and reform again and again, their teachings preserved in no datapad, no holocron, but in the cellular memory of the Force itself, a trauma remembered by every Jedi who dreams of fire, and every Sith who wakes to silence. And from this ancient schism, in a time so old, it cannot be dated, came the Jedi, the first true order, balanced in name but broken in spirit, who tried to live between serenity and fury, detachment and desire, and who built their sanctum on the unstable world of Tython, where the Force was strongest, and where the truth was loudest. They created temples of stone and glass and silence, carving laws into the sand, binding emotion in chains, and teaching that to stray too far into passion or asceticism would summon chaos. But even they, the Jedi, could not silence what was already boiling beneath them, a storm long whispered, long denied. The Force does not desire balance. It does not desire peace. It only desires to move, and those who try to trap it in doctrine, in structure, in cold ceremony, find themselves cracked and hollowed by its refusal to be caged. And so the Jedi wise, ancient noble would fall, not yet, not now, but soon, because even as they taught harmony, they buried the truth that the Force was not a river of light, but a sea of contradictions, that to name it was to lie, and that among their youngest initiates were those who already dreamed of conquest, and among their oldest masters were those who already feared. What they saw growing in the eyes of the children born under red stars, and somewhere, in the cold spaces between all things, the Force waited, not with patience, but with inevitability, for the time when a child would be born, not from lineage, not from love, but from its will alone, formed without father, filled with fury, and carrying within him the scream of all who came before. The chosen one was not born yet, but the Force had already begun to remember him, and the ones who came before the light, broken, forgotten, burned into silence, had already dreamed of his shadow. Chapter 2. The ashes of Tythonth world of Tython, ancient and scarred, lies beneath twin suns that scorched its barren plains, yet beneath that scorched surface the bones of 1,000 fallen spirits whisper still in the wind, for here, where the first temples were hewn from stone and sweat, the fragile dream of balance first shattered like glass in the hands of gods long forgotten, and from the ashes of that ruin the Jedi Order was born, not in peace, but in the blood of brothers turned enemies. Their light fractured into blinding shards that cut deep into the marrow of time itself. Tython was the crucible where the Force revealed itself not as harmony, but as a tempest of opposing tides, light and dark, serenity and fury, order and chaos, all locked in an endless dance that the early Force walkers dared to name balance, though their bones told a different story, one of betrayal buried beneath sacred oaths, and of truths too terrible to speak aloud. The Jedi, who once sought to walk the middle path, found themselves consumed by the very passions they tried to bind, their hearts torn between duty and desire, their minds shattered by visions of destruction and glory, until the world itself seemed to cry out in agony, and the skies rained fire upon their temples, burning their sanctuaries to ash and sending their teachings scattering like dust upon the cosmic winds. From the ruins rose the Jedi, a new order forged in the crucible of war and fear, clad in robes as white as the bones beneath soil, sworn to suppress the dark not only in others but within themselves, building grand temples on distant worlds like Coruscant, where the shadows of their past were buried beneath marble and steel, and where silence became their greatest weapon. Yet silence is never enough to smother a storm, for within the halls of these new temples, whispers grew like poison, whispers of doubt, of hidden passions, of broken truths, and of the darkness that no oath could truly bind. And beneath the veneer of serenity, the Jedi built walls of denial and fear, pretending the Force could be tamed, as if to cage a star would stop it from burning. The ashes of Tython are not only the remnants of a fallen world, but the echo of every lie the Jedi told themselves, that light alone could conquer, that balance was a path to peace, that darkness was a foe to be destroyed, rather than an inseparable shadow of all who dared to wield the Force. It was in this blindness that the seeds of the fall were sown, for as the Jedi cast away their doubts and desires, others embraced them, letting their anger feed the fire within, becoming something darker, something patient and cunning, the first Sith Lords, born not from cruelty alone, but from a hunger to reclaim what the Force had denied, freedom from the illusion of balance. And so the galaxy was drawn into conflict, not just of armies or weapons, but of souls torn between the lie of peace and the truth of war, a cycle without end, spinning through the void like a spiral of smoke and blood. And all who lived beneath the twin suns of Tython would bear the weight of this ancient fracture, the prophecy whispered in forgotten tongues. carried by the winds of dying stars, that one day a child born of no man's seed would walk the path between light and dark, and bring an end to this endless war. But for now, the Jedi stood blind, the Sith lurked in shadow, and the ashes of Tython settled like dust on the bones of the galaxy's forgotten past. Chapter 3. Knights of the Hollow Temple. The Jedi Temple on Coruscant rose from the molten heart of the city planet, like a blade forged to pierce the endless sky, its spires shining pale against the haze of stars, a monument to order and silence, to discipline and duty, yet beneath its shining surface lay shadows older than the Republic itself, echoes of voices long silenced, and the ghosts of those who had walked the path of the Force only to be broken by it. These were the Knights of the Hollow Temple, not warriors of light, nor servants of darkness, but something between, echoes of a forgotten truth trapped behind walls of marble and doctrine, their souls hollowed by the weight of expectation, their hearts filled with questions they dared not ask. They were the exiles and the doubters, those who had once looked upon the storm of the Force and saw not balance, but fracture, those who had dared to feel passion or fear or love, and were cast out for their sins, wandering the void between stars as phantoms without rest, their names erased from the annals of history, yet their stories lingered in the cracks beneath the temple's polished floors, whispered in the echoes of empty chambers, where the youngest acolytes would sometimes hear voices in the night, voices that spoke not of peace, but of fire and blood, of betrayal hidden beneath, oaths sworn in light. The Hollow Temple was a place of contradiction, for it was both sanctuary and prison, a place where the Jedi sought to purify themselves through meditation and ritual, yet found themselves haunted by the very shadows they denied. The Order demanded serenity, a calm like still water, unbroken by ripple, but beneath this surface, the Force seethed like a living thing, refusing to be tamed, pulling at the souls of those who tried to deny its dual nature. Among the Knights of the Hollow Temple were those who whispered of the Sith, not as monsters, but as teachers, as brothers and sisters of the Force who had embraced what the Jedi denied, and who warned that the path of denial was a lie as deadly as any blade. These secret voices spoke of forgotten rituals, of ancient wars where the Force had torn the galaxy asunder, where Jedi and Sith had danced in flames that consumed worlds, and where the truth of the Force was not light or dark, but endless shadow and fire. The temple was not hollow only in spirit, but in truth, for the Jedi had hidden secrets beneath its foundations, holocrons filled with lies, ancient texts rewritten to erase the past, and prophecies twisted to serve their own ends. Those who sought the truth were branded heretics, their voices silenced by the weight of dogma and fear, and the Order grew ever more rigid, blind to the decay spreading within. And yet, even in the heart of the temple, the Force did not lie still. It moved like a serpent beneath the stone, waiting for the moment to strike, for the balance to shatter, for the children born beneath the red stars to awaken and bring the age of fire. The Knights of the Hollow Temple were the last echoes of a dying order, their faith shaken but unbroken, their minds torn between duty and doubt, and their fate tied to the one who would come, the child born without father, the storm incarnate, the chosen one. They did not know this yet. They only knew the silence, growing louder, the shadows deepening, and the cold that crept beneath the robes of their masters. The temple was a hollow place indeed, a shell of light, concealing the darkness festering beneath, and soon the boy from Tatooine would cross its threshold, bringing with him the flame that would burn all to Ashdod. Chapter 4. The prophecy of the Chosen One, long before the temples rose like bones of forgotten gods, long before the Jedi cast their silken robes against the cold stars, there was a whisper, a murmur in the depths of the Force, like the echo of a breath held since the beginning of time itself, a secret sung by the winds that dance between galaxies, carried only on the dying light of forgotten suns. This whisper grew into a voice that spoke of balance, of destiny, and of one who would rise not from lineage, nor from the machinations of kings or councils, but from the will of the Force itself. They called this voice the prophecy of the Chosen One, a truth wrapped in shadow and flame, spoken in tongues older than the Republic, scribed in holocrons, hidden from the eyes of even the wisest Jedi Masters. The prophecy was not a promise of salvation, nor a guarantee of peace, but a haunting melody of inevitability, a cycle of birth and death, light and darkness, creation and destruction woven into the very fabric of the Force. It told of a child born of no father, conceived by the living currents of the Force, a being destined to bring balance by uprooting both the light that blinded and the darkness that consumed. But the meaning of balance was never clear. Was it harmony, where light and dark existed side by side like twin stars? Or was it annihilation, the death of both in fire and ash? The Jedi chose their interpretation, for they were desperate for hope in an age clouded by fear. They clung to the promise of a savior, a single light strong enough to banish the darkness, to heal the fractures that ran deep through the galaxy. But the Sith, too, listened to the prophecy, twisting it, warping it, bending it to their own will, whispering that balance would be achieved through domination, that the Chosen One would be the instrument of their rebirth and reign. Thus, the prophecy became a double-edged blade, wielded by light and shadow alike, a truth that bound and betrayed in equal measure. It was passed down through secret halls, locked away in ancient holocrons etched with forbidden knowledge, guarded by those who feared its power and those who worshipped its inevitability. Many sought to claim the title of Chosen One, to shape the future by force or faith, but none could seize the elusive flame that flickered beyond reach. And then came a child born of a slave woman in the desert dust, a boy who carried the weight of galaxies in his veins, though no one yet knew the storm he harbored. The Jedi Council debated, divided by fear and hope, uncertain if this child was the light to save them or the darkness that would consume all. They sensed the ripples he cast in the Force, tremors that shattered the calm they prized, and yet they bound themselves with dogma and tradition, unable or unwilling to face the truth lurking in his eyes. For the prophecy was a riddle wrapped in sorrow, a song of fate sung by a Force that was both cruel and indifferent. It promised salvation, but only through sacrifice. It spoke of balance, but only through destruction, and it whispered that the Chosen One would carry the sins of all who came before him, a burden heavier than any star. The Force itself seemed to breathe through the child, pulsing in rhythms older than memory, drawing the attention of those who lurked in shadow, Sith who dreamed of power, Jedi who feared the inevitable, and the ancient echoes of forgotten wars. The prophecy loomed like a storm on the horizon, its dark clouds gathering with silent fury, and the galaxy stood at the edge of a precipice, unaware that the fall had already begun. The child would walk the path of light and dark, of love and hate, of loyalty and betrayal. He would rise as a beacon and fall as a shadow, The balance he was destined to bring would come not from peace, but from fire, and in the quiet moments before the storm, the Force whispered his name, a name yet unspoken, a destiny yet fulfilled. Chapter 5. The Boy Without a Father in the Endless Desert Wasteland of Tatooine. Beneath twin suns that beat down with unforgiving heat, a child was born to a woman whose name has long since faded from the scrolls of history. A woman bound not by freedom but by chains unseen, shackled in body and soul to a life of servitude and silence. Shmi Skywalker, the mother, carried within her womb the seed of a destiny that no star system dared to foresee. A boy without father, conceived not through flesh or blood, but by the indelible will of the Force itself. The Force, ancient and inscrutable, wove through the cosmic tapestry like a restless spirit. And in the dusty settlement where shadows stretched long under the burning suns, it chose to imprint its power upon this child, whose cry was the first sound of a new age, a cry that carried the weight of prophecy, the promise of change, and the dread of destruction. Qui-Gon Jinn, a Jedi master of unorthodox belief and quiet rebellion against the dogma that gripped the Jedi Order like a suffocating cloak, discovered the boy by chance, or perhaps by the inexorable pull of fate. He saw in the child's eyes a flame that neither flickered nor dimmed, a light that held both hope and warning, and he sensed the rawness of the Force coursing through every fiber of the boy's being. The Council of Jedi, stern and unyielding, in their traditions, tested the boy with rituals old as time, measuring his potential against their ancient codes. Yet even as they saw the power that lay dormant within Anakin Skywalker, they recoiled, bound by their fear and the chains of their orthodoxy. He was too old to begin the training, they said. His emotions were a wildfire. He was dangerous, unpredictable, but Qui-Gon, unshaken by their doubts, believed in the boy's purpose. Convinced that he was the one spoken of in the forbidden prophecies, the chosen one, destined to bring balance to the Force, and so, with quiet resolve, he took Anakin under his wing, pledging to guide him through the shadows and storms that lay ahead. The boy grew swiftly, his body strong and unyielding, yet his mind and heart remained a tumultuous sea, tossed by waves of love, fear, and anger. The harshness of slavery was a ghost that haunted him, the memory of his mother's suffering a wound that festered beneath the veneer of his calm. Yet, in the light of the Force, Anakin was a paradox, a child of innocence and fury, of hope and doom intertwined. Within the corridors of the Jedi Temple, whispers followed the boy like a shadow. Some masters feared him, sensing the darkness that simmered just beneath his skin, while others saw only the potential for salvation. The Order was divided, torn between faith and fear, between the need to control and the desire to believe. But the boy himself was unaware of the storm gathering within. His dreams were haunted by shadows, of fire, of loss, of voices calling from beyond the stars. The Force spoke to him in riddles, in visions half seen, in dreams that burned like warnings. And yet the boy clung to the light as a drowning man clings to air. The galaxy beyond the temple walls was vast and uncaring, a place where war and peace danced in endless cycle, and the boy without a father was destined to become both its savior and its destroyer. The threads of his fate were woven by hands, unseen, pulled taut by forces that would not be denied. In the deserts where he first drew breath, the sands shifted like the tides of destiny, and the winds carried the echoes of ancient wars and forgotten betrayals. Here, the boy was born not just of a mother's love, but of the living Force, a living flame in the darkness, a promise whispered in the void. Yet even as Anakin stepped into the light of the Jedi path, the shadow of his beginning stretched. Long behind him, a beginning without father, without choice, and without escape. And so the boy without a father walked forward, carrying with him the weight of all that was to come, the hope of a galaxy, the fear of an order, and the dark destiny that awaited beneath the shining mask. Chapter 6. The Fire Beneath the Temple, the Jedi Temple, a towering monument of stone. And light sat upon Coruscant's gleaming surface like a serene beacon, a sanctuary for those who sought to master the Force in its disciplined stillness. Yet beneath its polished halls and sacred chambers, where the light of 1,000 stars seemed to linger frozen in glass and crystal, there burned a fire, not of flame, but of hunger, turmoil and shadows, long denied Anakin Skywalker. The boy once bound to desert sands, now stood among the acolytes and knights clad in robes of solemn white. But the fire within him refused to be quelled by ritual or reason. His spirit roared beneath the temple's silence like a caged tempest, his heart torn by memories of loss, visions of darkness, and an anger that throbbed like a pulse deep in his chest. The training was strict, the teachings ancient and unyielding. Yet Anakin's every step revealed cracks in the Order's veneer, cracks that whispered of fear, of doubt, and of truths too terrible to face openly. The Jedi Council watched him closely, their eyes sharp and cold, wary of the boy whose power threatened to outpace their control. Yet none could deny the rawness of his connection to the Force, a thread woven with threads of both light and shadow, stronger and more volatile than anything they had seen in generations. Anakin was no mere student. He was a living storm, a convergence of prophecy and peril, and the temple trembled beneath his presence. But even as the Jedi sought to shape him in their image, Anakin's spirit resisted, a wildfire refusing to be tamed. His dreams were haunted by his mother's cries, by the screams of those he could not save, by shadows that moved just beyond the edges of sight. These visions fed the fire beneath the temple, stoking it into a blaze that no meditation could extinguish. In secret, Anakin found solace not in the temple's cold chambers, but in the warm glow of forbidden thoughts, of love, of hope, of Padma Madala, a senator whose grace and strength seemed to mirror the light he longed to hold. Their connection was a fragile spark in the darkness, yet it kindled a dangerous flame, for the Jedi forbade attachment, and love was the root of all passion, and passion the seed of the dark side. Within the temple's walls, whispers of unrest grew like wildfire, spreading through shadowed corridors and hidden alcoves. Some masters feared the boy's defiance, sensing the darkness pooling beneath his surface, a darkness that pulsed with every heartbeat and threatened to consume all. Others, like Obi-Wan Kenobi, saw not a monster, but a brother, a soul torn between the light and the storm, struggling to find his place in a galaxy that demanded perfection and denied pain. Yet the temple, for all its grandeur, was a cage, cold, hollow, and unyielding, a place where the fire beneath could not be spoken of, only feared and concealed. The Jedi taught control, detachment, and silence. But beneath these teachings simmered a secret truth, that to deny the fire was to let it burn all the stronger in shadow. And in the deepest crypts beneath the temple, long thought abandoned, Sith artifacts lay buried, relics of a time when darkness was not hidden, but wielded openly, when the galaxy was torn apart by war and betrayal. These remnants pulsed faintly with the dark side, calling to those who dared to listen. Palpatine, the Chancellor, cloaked in smiles and secrets, walked the halls like a shadow in the light, his influence reaching unseen into every corner. He whispered promises of power and salvation to the boy with the burning heart, stoking the fire beneath the temple with words sweet and deadly. The Jedi did not see the web tightening around their precious student. They did not hear the fire crackling beneath their feet, growing closer to consuming them all. For the fire beneath the temple was no mere metaphor. It was the awakening of a darkness as ancient as the stars, a darkness that had waited patiently for the moment when a soul fierce enough to wield it would come. And Anakin, the boy who had never known peace, was that soul. The balance between light and dark faltered beneath the temple's shining spires, and the flames of destiny flickered ever higher, ready to engulf all who stood in their path. Chapter 7. The Face Behind the Mask. Senate chamber glimmered like a jewel under the glow of Coruscant's endless city lights. But behind its grandeur lay something rotten. Chancellor Palpatine sat at the heart of it all, cloaked in benevolence, a man whose smile seemed to warm every corner of the Republic. To the galaxy, he was hope in a time of war. To Anakin Skywalker, he was a father in all but blood. But behind that smile, behind the soft, reassuring words, was a hollow void that consumed everything it touched. The Jedi did not see it. They never saw anything beyond their own robes, their own dogma, their own arrogance. They believed themselves guardians of peace, yet their hands were now red with the blood of soldiers they commanded. War had twisted them into generals, strategists, and executioners. They told themselves it was for the Republic, for the people, for peace. But in truth, it was for survival, because they feared extinction. Anakin walked the polished marble corridors of the Senate, boots echoing in the vast emptiness. His mind was a storm. The council's mistrust, their endless lectures about patience and restraint. They gave him a seat at their table, but not their trust. They gave him power, but no respect. And so he drifted, searching for someone who believed in him, someone who saw his strength not as a threat, but as a gift. He found that someone in Palpatine. Anakin, the Chancellor, greeted him warmly as the doors whispered shut behind him. The man rose from his chair with surprising grace for his age, his eyes glinting with fatherly pride. "You've come, good. I was beginning to think the Jedi had locked you away in their temple." Anakin smirked faintly, though his tone held bitterness. "They might as well. Every time I speak, it's another lecture on caution. Another warning that I single quotes too aggressive." Palpatine's smile was patient, understanding. The Jedi have grown rigid. Blinded by their codes, they fear what they cannot control. He placed a gentle hand on Anakin's shoulder, his voice a whisper of silk. "But you, my boy, you are destiny itself. The prophecy speaks of balance, does it not? How can balance come from those who cling to one extreme?" Anakin's chest tightened. He wanted to believe the council was wrong, that he was meant for more, that the whispers in his heart, the hunger for action, for power were not sins, but the will of the Force. "They ask you to deny your nature," Palpatine continued, his voice soft yet sharp. "But I see the truth. You are strong because you feel, because you care. That is no weakness, Anakin. That is what makes you the most powerful Jedi of all." The words sank like hooks into his soul. For years, he had hidden his doubts, his rage, his love for Padma, all sins in the Jedi's eyes. But here, in this chamber, there was no judgment, only validation. Outside the windows, the galaxy burned. The Clone Wars raged on every front, armies clashing in 1,000 star systems. Millions dead, whole worlds reduced to ash. And behind it all, an unseen hand moved the pieces, pulling strings in perfect silence. Palpatine guided Anakin to the grand balcony that overlooked Coruscant's eternal cityscape. "Do you know why this war began?" he asked quietly. Anakin frowned. "Because of the Separatists, because of Dooku." "Yes," Palpatine said with a thin smile. "That is the story the Jedi tell. But the truth, my boy, is far more elegant." His voice lowered, almost reverent. "This war was inevitable not because of politics, but because of weakness. The Republic rotted from within. Greed, corruption, cowardice. The Senate squabbled while systems starved. Someone had to act. Someone had to bring order." Anakin stared at the endless sprawl of durasteel and glass, his reflection fractured in the transbarasteel panes. Order, that word sounded like salvation. The Jedi were too blind to see it. Palpatine said, stepping closer. "So I gave them a choice. Adapt, ... or perish." Anakin turned sharply, confusion flickering in his eyes. "What are you saying?" Palpatine's smile deepened, shadow pooling in the lines of his face. "I am saying, dear boy, that I have guided events ... shaped them for the greater good." The air seemed to thicken, the hum of speeders outside fading into silence. Anakin's heart pounded, but his feet stayed rooted. He should have felt outrage, betrayal, but instead, there was only curiosity. "Think," Palpatine urged softly. "Who else could have forged the greatest army in galactic history? Who else could unite a fractured galaxy under a single banner? Not the Jedi, not the Senate. They would have let the galaxy burn." His voice became a low, seductive growl. "I did what had to be done." Anakin's breath caught. The pieces began to align too perfectly. The clones, the war, the Senate's emergency powers, all of it, double quotes, "you, ... His voice was barely a whisper. "You started this war." Palpatine's eyes gleamed, golden flecks hidden deep within. "I ensured its necessity, so that peace could be forged from chaos." His tone softened again, wrapping Anakin like a warm cloak. "But peace, Anakin, requires strength. A strength the Jedi cannot provide. A strength only you possess." Anakin swallowed hard. His mind screamed to recoil, to denounce the man before him, but his heart burned with something else: purpose, destiny, power. Palpatine's words flowed like poison honey. "You are not their pawn, Anakin. You were never meant to be chained by their codes. You were born to lead, to rule, to shape the galaxy into what it was always meant to be." He leaned close, his voice barely audible. "I can show you how." Hands trembled as he gripped the balcony rail. Somewhere deep inside, a voice, the voice of a boy who once dreamed of freeing slaves, whispered that this was wrong. But another voice, louder, stronger, thundered that this was his destiny. Far below, the city stretched like an endless machine, lights flickering like dying stars. The galaxy was tearing itself apart, and here stood Anakin Skywalker on the edge of something vast, something terrible, something inevitable. The mask was slipping. The kind, fatherly chancellor was fading, revealing something cold and ancient beneath. Anakin saw Itan did nothing. The Jedi believed the prophecy promised salvation. They were wrong. It promised fire, and tonight that fire began to burn. Chapter 8. The mother that screamed the twin sons of Tatooine bled across the horizon, staining the desert in crimson and gold. Heat shimmered like a mirage, warping the dunes into shapes that mocked memory. Anakin Skywalker stood at the edge of the Lars homestead, his boots sinking into sand that once felt like chains. He had sworn never to return, never to let this barren graveyard of dreams claim him again. Yet here he was, a Jedi Knight draped in shadows, his cloak whipping in the dry wind. His heart pounded like a war drum. His mother was here, and she was dying. Owen Lars spoke in a voice taut with fear. "She's out there, Anakin, taken by the Tuscans weeks ago. We searched, but no one ever comes back from that." His eyes flicked to the lightsaber at Anakin's belt. "You can't fight the whole desert." "I'm not leaving her," Anakin said. His voice was low, a blade's edge ready to cut. He turned away before Owen could answer, before anyone could stop him. The suns dipped lower as he mounted the speeder bike, its engine growling like a beast eager for blood. Sand lashed against his face as he tore across the wasteland, the wind screaming in his ears like a chorus of ghosts. Every mile was a heartbeat, every heartbeat a whisper of her name. "Shmi, Shmi, hold on." Night fell like a curtain, and the desert turned cruel. The air grew cold, the stars sharp as shards of glass. Ahead, firelight flickered against the rocks of Tuscan camp, crouched in the darkness like a wound. Anakin killed the engine and slipped from the bike, his breath a steady furnace of rage. He moved like a shadow, silent, lethal. The first guard never saw the blade ignite. A hiss of blue fire, a gasp cut short, and the body crumpled without sound, then another and another. The night began to drink blood. He found her in a ragged tent, bound and broken, her skin pale as bone under the starlight. Her breath came in shallow gasps, her eyes clouded with pain, but when they lifted to him, they shone with something pure. Recognition, love, Arnie. The word was a whisper, a thread of sound that nearly snapped his soul in two. He fell to his knees beside her, hands trembling as he cradled her face. "Mum, I'm here now." The chains clinked softly as he fumbled to free her, tears burning his eyes like acid. "It's okay, everything's going to be okay." But it wasn't. He knew it even as he said the words. Her body was broken beyond healing, her spirit frayed by suffering no heart should bear. She smiled through bloodied lips, her hand rising to touch his cheek, light as a breath. "You look so grown up," she whispered, "so strong. I'm proud of you, Arnie." "No," he choked. "Don't say that. Don't leave me." His voice cracked, raw as an open wound. "Stay with me, please." Her fingers traced his jaw, trembling. "I love you, my son." Then the light in her eyes flickered and went out. Just like that, no scream, no struggle, just silence, heavier than the desert night. Something inside Anakin shattered. The sound that tore from his throat was not human, not Jedi, not anything that could be contained by the codes he had sworn to uphold. It was the sound of chains breaking, of a soul burning. He lowered her body gently to the ground, his hands slick with her blood. Then he stood, and the desert seemed to bow beneath the weight of his fury. The Tuscan camp stirred at the noise. Shapes moved in the dark, voices barking in their guttural tongue. Anakin ignited his saber. Blue fire roared to life, bathing his face in an unholy glow. And then the slaughter began. They came at him with Godofy sticks and blasters, but he was beyond flesh, beyond fear. The first fell with a stroke that split bone from shoulder to hip. The second lost his head before he could scream. He moved like a storm given flesh, each strike faster, harder, fueled by something the Jedi feared to name: rage, hate, power. The women ran clutching their young, but the saber cut them down all the same. The children screamed high, keening, wails that pierced the night, but Anakin did not hear them. Or perhaps he did, and the sound only fed the fire. The Force surged through him, not as a calm river, but as a tidal wave, crushing, consuming. His blade carved arcs of blue death, and the desert drank deep. When it was over, the camp was a graveyard. Bodies sprawled like broken dolls, fires guttering in the cold wind. Anakin stood in the center, chest heaving, his saber humming softly, as if in mourning. His face was a mask of shadow, his eyes twin furnaces of gold and blood. The night was silent now, save for the hiss of cooling metal and the whisper of sand over corpses. He fell to his knees, the weight of what he had done crashing down like a mountain. His hands shook as he deactivated the blade, its glow fading. Like a dying star, he stared at his reflection in the metal hilt-hand, saw a stranger, not a Jedi, not a hero, something else, something darker. He buried his mother beneath the twin suns at dawn, the sky ablaze with colors that mocked the grief. In his heart, as he laid the last stone, his tears dried to dust on his cheeks. In their place, only silence. And deep beneath that silence, a voice whispered, soft and cold as midnight, "Power, you are not weak, you are justice. They took from you. Take everything." When he returned to the homestead, Padme waited. She saw the shadows in his eyes, the way his jaw clenched like a blade about to strike. "Anakin, what happened?" His voice was flat, hollow. "They're dead." He didn't say who. He didn't need to. His hands still smelled of blood, and the desert still echoed with screams no wind could carry away. The boy from Tatooine was gone. In his place stood something the galaxy should have feared. A wound had opened not just in Anakin, but in the Force itself. The Jedi did not see it, could not, but the dark did, and it smiled. Chapter 9. The Clone Wars and the hollow peace the galaxy burned. From the outer rim to the core, the stars themselves seemed to tremble as fleets clashed in the void. Republic cruisers tore through separatist destroyers, there, guns vomiting fire and death into the endless black. Planets became battlefields, cities became graveyards. The Jedi, once keepers of peace now, strode at the head of armies, their lightsabers cutting paths not through darkness, but through flesh and steel. They told themselves it was necessary, that the war was just. But war does not know justice. Only hunger. Anakin Skywalker had become its champion. He stood aboard the Resolute, the flagship of his fleet, the hum of engines thrumming through durasteel decks beneath his boots. His eyes swept across the tactical display worlds, marked in red, each a wound bleeding into the galaxy. His voice cut like a blade through the silence. "Move the cruisers to Sector 7. I want those droid carriers wiped out before they reach the hyperlane." The clone officers obeyed without hesitation. They always obeyed. They were made to obey. The Jedi Council had given him command, but not trust. Even now, whispers followed him like shadows, reckless, dangerous, too emotional. They sent their doubts cloaked in compliments, their warnings masked as advice. But Anakin had stopped listening. Out here, on the edge of the galaxy, their codes were ash, their lectures hollow. War demanded strength, and he gave it freely. Victory after victory carved his name into the bones of the galaxy. To the clones, He was more than a general. He was a symbol, a storm wrapped in flesh, a man who could not be broken. They loved him, feared him, followed him into hell without question. And the separatists learned to tremble at the name Skywalker. For where he walked, annihilation followed, but every triumph carried a price. The Jedi Temple, once a sanctuary of calm, had become a fortress. War tables replaced meditation chambers. Younglings sparred not for balance, but for battle. The council sat in endless deliberation, their voices sharp with politics. They watched. Anakin with wary eyes, yet did nothing to ease the storm within him. Obi-Wan tried Maker. He tried, but his words could not reach the places where Anakin bled. Not anymore. Padme was the only refuge left. The only warmth in a galaxy of cold. Metal and colder hearts. She met him in secret, their love a sin whispered in the shadows. In her arms the war faded, if only for a moment. But even there, fear crept in, silent as frost. Fear of loss, fear of death, fear of the visions that stalked his dreams like wolves in the dark. Visions of her pale, lifeless, slipping through his fingers like smoke. He woke in silence, his fists clenched, nails biting into flesh. The Jedi would call it attachment. They would call it weakness. But what did they know of love? What did they know of pain? He stopped telling them his dreams. He stopped telling them anything at all. And in the shadows of the Senate, Darth Sidious smiled. The war dragged on, a serpent coiled around the galaxy's throat. Each battle fed the beast. Each death tightened its grip. The Senate granted more power to the Chancellor, more legions to the front, more chains to bind the Republic in the name of freedom. Few noticed, fewer cared. They were too busy surviving, too busy bleeding, too busy burying their dead. Democracy rotted behind the facade of emergency decrees, and the Republic became an empire in all but name. Palpatine played his role with perfect grace. To the galaxy, he was the weary savior, the reluctant ruler bearing the weight of impossible burdens. To Anakin, he was a friend, a mentor, a father. His voice flowed like velvet through the corridors of power, soothing Anakin's doubts, feeding his anger, sharpening his hunger. The Council does not trust you. They never will, but I do. I see your greatness. I see the destiny the Force has written for you. And Anakin believed him because he wanted to. Because the alternative was a life chained to a council that feared him, a code that strangled him, a future that promised only loss. The war became his crucible. Every battle stoked the fire within. Every kill whispered that the Jedi way was a lie. How could serenity win a war? How could peace exist in a galaxy drowning in blood? He carved answers with his saber, left them smoking in the ruins of shattered droids and burning cities. The clones cheered. The council frowned. Palpatine smiled, but the victories were hollow. For every world saved, another burned. For every enemy slain, another rose. The spiral never ended. And somewhere in that spiral, the prophecy began to rot. The chosen one, the one who would bring balance to the Force, was drowning in its storm. He stood on the bridge of the Resolute, watching fire rain upon the shattered hulls of separatist frigates, and felt nothing. No triumph, no joy. Only the cold, creeping sense that this war was not ending, because it was never meant to end. It was a game played by unseen hands, and he was the strongest piece on the board. But whose game, whose victory? When the battle reports came in, he barely listened. Another victory, another graveyard. Another day closer to something he could not name but felt in his bones like a coming storm. Far below the stars, in chambers lined with shadows, Darth Sidious whispered to the night. Soon, Chapter 10, the knight who dreamed of Death Knight had become Anakin Skywalker's enemy. In the silent hours, when the engines of war slept and the galaxy paused between screams, dreams came for him. Dreams of fire. Dreams of her. Padme, her face pale beneath a shroud, her breath a fading whisper, her hands reaching for him before the dark swallowed her whole. He woke each time with a strangled cry, his skin slick with sweat, the phantom taste of ash on his tongue, and, always, the same thought clawed through the ruins of sleep. I cannot lose her. He sat on the edge of their bed in the Coruscant apartment, the city's endless glow bleeding through the windows. Padme slept behind him, her breathing soft, oblivious to the tempest raging inside him. Anakin pressed his hands to his face, nails digging into his skin as if pain could anchor him to sanity. He had faced armies. He had stood before death without fear, but this helplessness was the one enemy he could not fight. The Force showed him visions, clear as glass, cruel as truth. Her death was coming, and he was powerless to stop it. The Jedi would tell him to let go, to accept fate, to surrender his love to the current of the Force, as if Padme were a leaf to be swept away by some indifferent stream. He could almost hear their voices, cold as stone, reciting their codes. There is no death. There is the Force. Empty words for empty men who had never loved as he loved. They wanted him to be a machine, obedient, unfeeling, hollow. But Anakin was not hollow. He burned. He left before dawn, the city still drowning in its neon night. His speeder cut through the traffic lanes like a silver blade, carrying him toward the only voice that had ever spoken the truth. Palpatine's, the Chancellor's. Office was dim, its walls cloaked in the velvet darkness of early morning. Only a single lamp burned, casting long shadows that pooled like ink across the floor. Palpatine sat waiting, his silhouette framed against the sprawling lights of Coruscant. He looked like a man burdened by the galaxy, yet when his eyes met Anakin's, they gleamed with something sharp and knowing. You couldn't sleep, Palpatine said softly, not as a question, but a verdict. Anakin's throat was dry. I keep seeing her, dying. His voice cracked on the last word, raw as an open wound. I can't stop it. Palpatine rose slowly, his robes whispering like smoke. The visions come because you are strong in the Force, Anakin, stronger than any Jedi in 1,000 years. But the Jedi will not help you, will they? His voice dripped with quiet disdain. They will tell you to let her go, to watch her die. Anakin's jaw clenched. They don't understand. They never will. Palpatine's tone softened, the serpent curling closer. But I do. There are ways, powerful ways, to save those we love from death. The words struck like a blade sliding between Anakin's ribs. He turned sharply, his breath shallow. What do you mean? Palpatine's eyes gleamed in the half-light, twin embers in the dark. There are abilities some consider unnatural, forbidden by the Jedi, of course, because they fear what they do not control. But the power exists, Anakin. The power to hold death itself at bay. Anakin stared, his pulse thundering in his ears. The power to stop death, the power to save. Pardon me, it sounded like madness, and yet something deep inside him stirred, a dark, desperate hope blooming like poison. How? His voice was barely a whisper. Tell me how. In time, Palpatine murmured, placing a hand on his shoulder, warm and steady. When you are ready, when you embrace your true potential not as a servant of their failing code, but as something greater, something no Jedi could ever be. Anakin swallowed hard. His mouth tasted of ash and hunger. He wanted to ask more, to demand the secret now, but the words tangled in his throat. He felt the hook sinking deeper, felt the line pulling him toward a shore he could not yet see, and did not want to resist. Outside, the war thundered on, systems fell, fleets burned, millions screamed. But in Anakin's mind, there was only one cry, the cry of a woman he loved, dying in silence. And the Jedi, blind in their ivory tower, spoke of detachment while the galaxy drowned in blood. Every council meeting sharpened the blade of his resentment. They questioned him, doubted him, denied him the rank of master, even as they sent him to do their killing. He knelt on the floor of their chamber, the marble cold beneath his knees, and felt their mistrust like a weight on his spine. They feared him. He saw it in their eyes. Fear disguised as caution, contempt veiled in courtesy. They spoke of the will of the Force, but what was their will except chains? Obi-Wan tried to soothe him, as always, tried to bridge the widening gulf. Anakin, the Council is only cautious because you have so much power. They want to guide you, guide me. Anakin's voice was a snarl. Or control me. I'm not a child, Obi-Wan. I'm not their slave. Obi-Wan's face tightened, but he said nothing, perhaps because he knew, deep down, that Anakin was right. The nights grew longer. The dreams grew sharper. Padme's face, her voice, her final breath, they haunted him like a curse. He would not let it happen. He could not. And if the Jedi would not help him, then he would find another way, even if it meant tearing the galaxy apart. Chapter 11. The Birth of Darth Vader. The night the Jedi Temple burned, Coruscant did not sleep. Fire bled against the skyline, painting the clouds in shades of crimson and ash. Sirens wailed across the city as plumes of black smoke climbed toward the heavens like the hands of the damned. From the marble steps of the temple, blood ran in thin rivers, tracing patterns across stone, once consecrated to peace. The Order, proud and eternal, was dying. The blade that struck the first wound bore the name Skywalker. Anakin stood in the grand hall, his saber ignited, its blue glow hissing against the echoing silence. The walls, carved with stories of 1,000 generations, trembled with the screams of the dying. Younglings stared up at him, their faces pale moons of terror, their small voices breaking. Master Skywalker, there are too many of them. What are we going to do? He said nothing. His shadow stretched long across the polished floor, a dark shape wearing the face of a man. And then the saber moved. The slaughter began in whispers, then in roars. Lightsabers clashed as knights, and masters fell beneath the fury they could not comprehend. Anakin moved like a storm given flesh, his blade carving arcs of blue fire through bodies and bone. No hesitation, no mercy. Each strike tore another thread from the fabric of what he once was. The Force surged through him, not calm, not balance, but a raging tide of hate and hunger. It thrilled in his veins, whispering promises sweet as venom. This is freedom. This is power. This is what you were born for. The temple archives burned, ancient knowledge curling into ash. Statues toppled, their serene faces shattered on marble floors, slick with blood. The air reeked of smoke and scorched flesh. Somewhere, a child screamed a sound so small it should have broken him. But the man who would have cared was gone, buried, dead far above. The spires of Coruscant flickered with emergency lights as the Senate broadcast the Chancellor's words. The Jedi have betrayed the Republic. They have attempted to assassinate your leader. They are enemies of peace. Execute Order 66. Across the stars, legions turned their guns on those they once called. General's betrayal bloomed like fire in every corner of the galaxy. And in the heart of it all, Anakin Skywalker knelt before the darkness. He found Sidious in his private chambers, the room shrouded in shadows deeper than night. The man who had worn the mask of a kindly ruler now revealed his true face, twisted, and pale eyes blazing like twin sons of hell. Anakin sank to his knees, the weight of his deeds pressing him down like chains. What have I done? His voice was a whisper, hollow, trembling. Sidious smiled a thin, cruel curve of lips. You have brought peace, justice, a new order. His voice slivered like silk, wrapping Anakin in its coils. You were not born to serve, my boy. You were born to rule, and now you shall. He extended a hand, fingers pale and skeletal, resting it upon Anakin's bowed head like a benediction. You are no longer Anakin Skywalker. That name belongs to the Jedi, and the Jedi are dead. Rise, Lord Vader. The name struck like thunder. Vader, it echoed through the hollow corridors of his soul, shattering what little light remained. When he lifted his head, the man was gone. In his place stood something colder, harder a blade, given life. The last chains fell away, and with them the boy who dreamed of stars. But there was still one task left. The separatist leaders huddled on Mustafar, hiding in their fortress of iron and flame, whispering promises of a future that would never come. Vader came for them in a storm of fire. The skies above Mustafar boiled with smoke, rivers of molten rock cutting the world into veins of red. The fortress loomed against the horizon, black and jagged as a fang. He entered without a word, his boots striking the floor like war drums. The separatists turned, their faces blanching at the sight of Hemmerman draped in shadow, eyes burning like molten suns. Lord Vader, Newt Gunray stammered, his voice quivering like dry leaves. The war is over. The Chancellor promised, the blade answered, its crimson glow hissing to life. Promises meant nothing now, only death. The slaughter was swift, efficient, merciless. Metal halls rang with screams and blast of fire, the air thick with smoke, and the stench of blood. Vader moved through them like a phantom, his saber a streak of red lightning, his breath harsh and ragged. When the last body fell, silence settled over Mustafar, silence broken only by the roar of lava, a sound like the heartbeat of hell. It should have ended there. But destiny had one more cruelty to weave. Obi-Wan came. The duel began with words pleas, accusations, tears burning in voices that once spoke only trust. Anakin, Obi-Wan said, his face carved with grief, Palpatine is evil. Vader's answer was a snarl, his voice raw with betrayal. From my point of view, the Jedi are evil. And then the sabers clashed, and the galaxy seemed to hold its breath. They fought across catwalks and rivers of fire, their blades painting arcs of light against the infernal dark. Sparks rained like dying stars as metal screamed beneath their strikes. They were not Jedi, not anymore. They were gods of war, titans locked in a dance of death. And yet, beneath the fury, something deeper twisted a love, shattered a brotherhood. Undone, the heat was unbearable, the air a furnace, but neither yielded. Not until Obi-Wan found the high ground, his blade trembling as he spoke the words that sealed it all. It's over, Anakin. I have the high ground. Vader's face twisted in rage, in disbelief, in pride that refused surrender. You underestimate my power. He leapt, hand fell. Obi-Wan's blade carved through flesh and bone, and the scream that tore from Vader's throat was a sound the galaxy would never forget. He hit the black sands, his body broken, his legs severed, the stench of burning flesh filling the air. Fire crawled across him like a living thing, devouring, consuming. His eyes, once bright with dreams, now blazed with hate as he clawed at the ground, his voice a ragged howl. I hate you. And above him, Obi-Wan wept. You were my brother, Anakin. I loved you. Then he turned and left, because love could not bear to kill, but neither could it save. The flames claimed what was left of the man, the boy who loved, the hero who dreamed. When the fire died, only a husk remained charred, broken, crawling on the edge of death. Sidious found him there, a whisper of breath amid the roar of lava. He carried him from the furnace, cradling. Ruin like a prize, machines rebuilt what flesh had lost. Iron replaced bone, circuits replaced sinew, and in the sterile light of an operating chamber, the monster was born. When the mask descended, sealing him in darkness, his first breath rasped. Like a grave opening, the sound would haunt the stars. Darth Vader rose, not a man, not a Jedi, but a shadow clad in armor, a fist closing around the throat of a dying galaxy. And somewhere, far away, Padmé Amidala breathed her last. Chapter 12. The Empire of Silence, the Republic, was dead. Not with an explosion, not with a cry, but with a whisper. In the Senate chamber, thunderous applause rolled like a tidal wave as Palpatine declared the birth of the Galactic Empire. Words like security, order, and peace echoed from marble walls, gilded with lies. Senators rose from their seats, cheering the fall of freedom with smiles carved from fear. Padmé Amidala sat among them, her heart a stone in her chest, her voice drowned by the storm. So this is how liberty dies, she murmured, with thunderous applause. Above Coruscant, fleets of star destroyers patrolled skies that once belonged to trade and travelers. The banners of the Empire draped across a galaxy that had traded chains for the illusion of safety. The clone army, the grand creation that had saved the Republic now, marched in lockstep under a different name, Imperial. Their white armor gleamed like bones under the light of a dying sun. Jedi starships rusted in hangars or burned in the wreckage of battlefields, their pilots nothing more than whispers on the wind. The purge was relentless. Across 1,000 systems, Order 66 bloomed like a plague, cutting down the guardians of peace in ambush and betrayal. Some fought, most died with sabers blazing, their last breath swallowed by blaster fire. Others ran, hunted like animals through forests, deserts, and oceans, until the Empire's hand closed on their throats. Their lightsabers became trophies. Their names became ashes. The Jedi Order, once a pillar of the galaxy, was reduced to ghosts and rumors. Mothers whispered their name as warnings to children. Obey, or the Jedi will take you. In the heart of this new empire, a black figure stalked the shadows. He had no name, save one that dripped from trembling lips like blood. Vader. He was neither man nor machine, but something worse, a nightmare given form, a will of iron wrapped in obsidian. His breath rasped like a death knell, each mechanical inhale a drumbeat of doom. Where he walked, silence followed. Worlds bent, leaders broke, hope withered like frost under flame. The fortress of the Jedi Temple still stood, but it was a tomb. Now, Its spires pierced the sky like broken fingers, its halls gutted of light. Statues of ancient masters lay shattered, their serene faces ground to dust beneath imperial boots. Within its desecrated heart, the archives had been gutted, their wisdom devoured by fire. The place smelled of smoke and old death. Vader walked those halls sometimes not out of guilt, but memory. The ghosts of younglings lingered here, faint. As whispers, he ignored them. Palpatine ruled from his throne, a spider at the center of a web spun across the stars. His voice flowed like venom through the veins of the Empire, soft and sweet as it promised safety while tightening chains. He sat in shadow, cloaked in robes darker than the void, his face a ruin of age and power. To the galaxy, he was emperor. To Vader, he was master. The bond forged in fire now sealed in silence, unbreakable at least for now. Vader obeyed. He crushed the separatists. He hunted the Jedi. He strangled governors who faltered, admirals who failed, senators who dared whisper rebellion. His saber, now crimson as spilled blood, became the instrument of an empire's will. His name was terror. Children woke screaming from dreams of his breath. Worlds surrendered at the sight of his shadow. He was the hammer, and the galaxy the anvil. Yet beneath the armor, something lingered, a ghost chained to a furnace of hate. Sometimes, when the silence grew too deep, Vader dreamed, not of conquest, not of power, but of her, Parb. Her voice echoed through the abyss, soft as a lullaby, cruel as a blade. You are my everything, Anakin. He awoke from those dreams with fists clenched, the durasteel walls dented beneath his rage. The machines stitched into his flesh hissed and groaned as they worked to cage the man inside the monster. But the cage was not strong enough to kill memory. The Emperor knew. Of course he knew. He spoke of it rarely, only when the silence threatened to swallow his apprentice whole. You suffer because you cling to what is dead, he said, his voice a serpent's hiss. Let it rot. Embrace your pain. Let it feed you. And Vader obeyed, because obedience was all that remained. He turned pain into power, grief into fury, and with each act of slaughter, the last embers of Anakin dimmed. Across the stars, the Force went quiet. Where once it hummed with life, now it lay still, smothered beneath the weight of tyranny. The Jedi were gone. The Sith reigned. Balance was a myth, rotting in forgotten prophecy. And yet, something stirred. Far from Coruscant, on backwater, worlds choked in sand and shadow, seeds of rebellion took root. Whispers spread in cantinas and alleys, of senators plotting in secret, of deserters forming cells, of a name spoken in hope, Skywalker. They did not know the truth, that Skywalker was dead, buried beneath black armor and molten hate. But lies can breed revolutions as easily as truths. The Emperor laughed at these whispers. Vader crushed them beneath his heel. But destiny is a river, not a chain, and rivers have a way of finding the sea. For now, the galaxy slept beneath the Empire's boot. For now, the stars shone on a sky of silence. But in that silence, the Force waited, patient as stone, watching the shadow it had birthed, and wondering if the light would ever return. Chapter 13. The son of the sky, the galaxy, had forgotten the sound of hope. For nearly 2 decades. Silence reigned, an iron silence, broken only by the march of imperial legions and the hollow voice of the Emperor echoing across the holonet. Worlds knelt, stars dimmed, freedom rotted in the dark. And yet, on a desolate world under twin suns, a boy looked to the sky and dreamed. Tatooine. A graveyard of forgotten names, where the sand devoured everything's cities, bones, memories. The wind howled across endless dunes, carrying whispers of the past like ghosts too stubborn to die. Here, among moisture farms clinging to survival, lived Luke Skywalker, a boy of 17, with eyes too bright for the dust, and a heart too restless for chains. He fixed vaporators beneath a sun that burned like judgment, but his soul was elsewhere up there, beyond the blue, among the stars that called to him with voices no one else seemed to hear. He knew nothing of the blood in his veins, knew nothing of the name that could shake empires. He only knew the ache of longing, sharp and merciless, that came each time he watched freighters streak across the horizon, trailing silver against the dying light. He would stand there for hours, the desert wind tugging at his tunic, his thoughts soaring far beyond Tatooine's prison of sand. Somewhere out there, adventure waited, freedom waited, destiny waited. And Luke, though he did not know it, had been waiting all his life. But he was not alone in his vigil. From the cliffs above the dune sea, cloaked in robes as colorless as the dust, Obi-Wan Kenobi watched. His beard had gone white, his face carved with lines of grief and years spent hiding from the galaxy he once served. The man who had been a general, a hero, now moved like a shadow through the desert, a ghost haunting the edges of his own failure. Every day he looked at the boy and saw a wound that would never heal. I trained his father. I watched him burn. And now, this. He had sworn an oath to guard the child, to keep him safe, to wait until the time was right. But the weight of waiting was a millstone grinding his soul to dust. Sometimes, when the wind screamed across the canyons, he heard another scream layered beneath it, the voice of a man aflame, roaring hatred through melting flesh. You were my brother, Anakin. I loved you. The words tasted like ashes even now. He whispered them into the night. When the desert lay still and only the stars bore witness, Luke grew unaware of the ghosts circling his life. He knew only chores and arguments with Owen Lars, whose voice cracked like a whip each time Luke spoke of leaving. You'll finish your work before you chase dreams, Owen said, his jaw a wall of stone. Luke bit back, the fire rising in his throat, but inside, the embers burned hotter. He wanted more, needed more, and somewhere in the marrow of his bones, the Force stirred a current winding through him, silent but insistent. Far from the sands of Tatooine, the shadow moved. Darth Vader stood on the bridge of an Imperial Star Destroyer, the void stretching. Before him, like an endless grave, stars gleamed cold and pitiless, their light glinting on the obsidian mask that sealed his ruin. His breath rasped slow and steady, the sound of a machine that once was a man. Beneath the armor, pain smoldered a constant, searing presence fused to his flesh. But the fire in his mind burned hotter still. He had become the Empire's fist, its executioner, its instrument of fear. Entire systems bent at his command. Admirals quaked under the weight of his gaze. And yet, none of it quenched the hunger hollowing him from within. He dreamed, though he hated it. Dreams of corridors filled with smoke and screaming younglings. Dreams of fire crawling up his limbs, devouring his flesh. And sometimes were, of all dreams, of her Padme, her voice like bells in the dark, her touch a memory that cut deeper than any blade. In those dreams, he was Anakin again for a heartbeat. And when he woke, it was 2 chains heavier than the armor welded to his body. The Emperor had taken everything except hate. Hate was his tether. Hate was his fuel. And in the furnace of his rage, the galaxy burned. Whispers reached his ears, rumors of dissidence gathering in shadows, of rebellion coiling like a serpent ready to strike. Vader crushed them wherever they crawled, his crimson blade reaping lives like wheat. But the whispers kept coming, multiplying, defying. Each time he silenced one, another rose. It was like chasing smoke through a storm. And deep beneath that storm, another whisper stirred one the Emperor had not yet spoken aloud. A name, a bloodline, a secret waiting to ignite. For now, the boy remained hidden. For now, Vader hunted ghosts while his own child gazed at the stars, ignorant of the darkness reaching for him. But destiny is patient, and destiny is cruel. Luke's first taste of fate came on a day like any other, when the desert wind stank of ozone and the suns bled red into the horizon. He trudged home with sand grinding in his boots, cursing another wasted day until he saw the smoke. Black coils rising from the homestead, thick as ink against the sky. His heart stuttered, then plunged into darkness as he ran, the wind clawing at his skin, his lungs burning. He found them in the courtyard, Owen and Beru, what was left of them. Charred husks sprawled in the dust, their faces melted into masks of horror. The smell of scorched flesh clawed at his throat, but worse was the silence of everything he had ever known, gone. He fell to his knees, the suns sinking behind him like twin coins dropped into blood. Something broke inside him, then not. The way Anakin broke, not yet, but enough to change the shape of his soul forever. When he rose, his eyes were dry, hard. The boy who dreamed of freedom had died among the ashes. The man who would fight was born. Obi-Wan watched from the shadows, his heart a weight of sorrow and inevitability. The tide had turned. The Force had spoken. The child of prophecy would walk his father's path, though whether to light or darkness. None could yet say. Above them all, in the iron halls of the Imperial Palace. The Emperor smiled. Chapter 14. The Empire and the Echo, the galaxy bled in silence. But in its hidden veins, rebellion stirred. It began as whispers, words traded in back alleys and smoke-filled cantinas, messages carved into code and smuggled through hyperspace on dying signals. Then the whispers grew teeth. Outposts burned. Convoys vanished into the void. Bled white across desert sands and frozen wastes. The Empire called them terrorists. The people called them hope. And at the heart of this flickering flame, a boy with his father's eyes took his first step into legend. Luke Skywalker left the ashes of Tatooine behind on a freighter's howl, his heart a graveyard of loss and unanswered questions. In his hands, he carried a weapon that felt more like prophecy than steel a lightsaber, blue as the edge of dawn. Obi-Wan had given it to him with a voice heavy as stone. Your father wanted you to have this when you were old enough. Lies cloaked in truth, truth wrapped in silence. But Luke did not yet know, could not know. He only felt the hum of the blade like a song in his blood, a call older than the stars. The old hermit had changed to Obi-Wan. Now Ben walked with a shadow clinging to his steps, a guilt that gnawed like a worm through the marrow of his bones. He spoke little, but when he did, his words were riddles carved from regret. The Force will be with you, he said as they fled Mos Eisley, stormtroopers scouring the streets for fugitives. Luke nodded, not understanding, not yet hearing. The storm in those words. The falcon roared into the sky, and the desert fell away, its secrets buried under a sea of stars. Somewhere, far across the void, a battle station drifted, moon of death veined with trenches, its heart pulsing with annihilation. The Death Star, the Emperor's promise, made flesh. With one shot, it could unmake worlds. It was fear distilled into metal, and it would become the throne upon which tyranny ruled the galaxy. But in the cold belly of that monster, another shadow moved. Tall, armored, black as a starless void, Darth Vader. His breath rasped in endless cadence, echoing through corridors slick with steel. He commanded with silence, his voice reserved for verdicts of death. Admirals bowed and trembled. None dared meet his gaze, for behind the mask lay a furnace that had forgotten mercy. And yet, for all his power, something hunted Vader, not in the corridors of the Death Star, not in the ranks of traitors and spies. He crushed beneath his heel. No, this was deeper, older, a ripple in the Force, a presence faint as a whisper, yet sharp as a blade against his mind. It came in dreams first, threading through the smoke of sleep. A boy standing in sunlight, his saber blazing blue, his face bright with defiance. A name the dreams never spoke, but Vader's heart knew, though he buried it in iron and silence. Skywalker, he told no one, not even the Emperor. But the shadow of that name haunted him as the rebellion struck its first. Real blowed the theft of the Death Star plans. Vader felt it as surely as he felt the hum of his own blade. The Force was stirring. Something was coming. Something that smelled of destiny and blood. Luke's world became war. Yavin's jungle moon throbbed with the heartbeat of rebellion. Roaring into the sky, troopers drilling in mud, voices hard with resolve and fear. Luke learned to fly, his hands gripping controls like the hilt of a saber. He learned to fight, his aim sharp, his courage sharper. But the Force remained a mystery. Obi-Wan tried to teach, in stolen hours beneath the canopy of alien trees. Stretch out with your feelings, he said, his voice like wind over graves. Luke tried. He failed. He tried again. And in the dark of his tent, he whispered to himself, I can do this. I have to. Then came the battle. Yavin the Fourth's skies split open as starfighters screamed toward the Death Star, its bulk blotting out the stars like the fist of a god. Tubla spat emerald fire, ripping ships to shreds. Pilots died with names on their lips, their last words drowned in static. Luke flew among them, the falcon at his side. Han's laughter crackling through comes like defiance given wings. One by one, the rebels fell, until only a few remained. The trench run stretched ahead, a canyon of death lit by tracer fire. Luke, dove, heart pounding, Obi-Wan's voice whispering through the din. Use the Force, Luke. Trust your instincts. He closed his eyes, let go. And in that breathless instant, the galaxy held still. The Force rose in him like a tide, vast and silent, cradling him in currents older than time. He fired. The torpedoes sank into darkness and the Death Star bloomed into light, a sun of fire devouring itself. The rebels roared. The Emperor trembled. And across the void, in the shattered wreckage of a dream, Vader spun into darkness, his fighter, screaming through the void like a wounded beast. He lived, but something inside him cracked when he heard the name of the boy who fired the shot. Skywalker. The whisper was no longer faint. It was a scream tearing through the hollows of his soul. He did not tell Sidious, not yet. Some secrets are too sharp to share. When the Death Star's flames faded into starlight, the galaxy changed. For the first time in an age, hope had teeth. The rebellion became more than whispers. It became war, and Vader swore an oath in the silence of his private chamber, the red glow of Mustafa's memory burning behind his eyes. I will find him. I will know the truth, and when I do, the galaxy will kneel. Far away, Luke stood among the cheering throngs, a medal heavy on his chest, not yet knowing the cost of the path he had chosen. He smiled, bright and fierce, the fire of youth blazing in his veins. But in the marrow of his being, the Force hummed a low, warning note, like distant thunder rolling across a sky not yet broken. The storm was coming, Chapter Blust, and the serpent tree the stars vanished behind a wall of storm as Luke Skywalker's X-Wing spiraled into the void. Dagobah swallowed the fighter whole, its skies choked with clouds the color of bruises. Lightning stitched ragged scars across the heavens, and rain slashed at the cockpit in silver knives. Luke fought the controls, his breath sharp, heart pounding. The ship groaned like a dying beast before plunging into a mire of black water, sinking with a hiss into the swamp's throat. Silence followed, broken only by the croak of unseen creatures and the soft, wet sound of something moving just beyond sight. Luke crawled from the wreckage, mud clinging to his boots, the stench of rot thick in the air. Dagobah was no world, was a wound. Trees twisted like broken bones, their roots gnarled in fetid water. Vines dangled like nooses, dripping with slime. Mist coiled across the ground in ghostly fingers, curling round his legs as if to drag him down. The air was heavy, clotted with moisture and something else, something older, darker. The Force was strong here, but not the way Luke had felt it before. This was no gentle current. This was a swamp of spirits, a graveyard where time itself had drowned. He moved through the fog, his hand resting on the hilt of his saber, blue light ready to bloom at the slightest threat. Shapes stirred in the mist shadows slithering through trees, eyes glinting like coals in the dark. But when he turned, there was nothing, only silence, broken by the hiss of the swamp breathing. Every sound felt alive. Every tree seemed to watch. Then he felt it, a presence, faint but piercing, like a needle of light through the fog, not hostile, not yet. He followed, pushing through tangles of vines until a shape emerged from the mist. Small, hunched, cloaked in rags. At first, Luke saw only a strange creature, green-skinned eyes, vast and glimmering like twin moons. It spoke in riddles, its voice cracked with age, yet sharp as a blade. Lost, you are. HM. Found, perhaps. It smiled a thin, secret smile that revealed nothing. Luke stared, confusion knotting his brow. I'm looking for a great warrior, a Jedi master. The creature chuckled, the sound like dry leaves. Wars do not make one great. Its words coiled like smoke around him, both mocking and true. Luke bristled, but followed, drawn deeper, into the swamp's heart, where shadows grew thick as tar dot. And then came the training. It was nothing like what he expected. No shining halls, no ranks of Jedi with sabers, blazing like stars. Only mud and mist, roots and ruin. Yoda Master of an order long dead moved like a wraith through the bog, his small frame cloaked in silence and wisdom. He spoke of balance, of fear, of the darkness that lives in every soul. Luke listened, but his heart strained against the leash of patience. He wanted power. He wanted answers. He wanted to fight. Yoda saw it all. The hunger, the storm, the shadow, clinging to the boy's heart like a serpent. He spoke, his voice grave as earth. Always in motion is the future. Difficult to see, but darkness I sense. Close to you, closer than you know. Luke swallowed hard, his throat dry as dust. I won't fail you. I'm not afraid. Yoda's eyes glimmered in the gloom. You will be, you will be. And then came the cave. It squatted in the swamp like a wound in the world, its mouth gaping black, its breath cold as the void. The trees around it writhed like serpents, their roots coiled into knots of bone. The air tasted of ash and secrets. Luke stared into that darkness and felt it staring back. His skin crawled. His breath quickened. What's in there? He whispered. Yoda's voice was soft, but it struck like a hammer. Only what you take with you. Luke hesitated. His fingers brushed the saber at his hip. He wanted to leave it, to prove he needed nothing but will. But fear gnawed at him, whispering in his bones. He buckled the weapon at his side and stepped. Into the dark, the cave swallowed him whole. Silence closed in, thick and choking, broken only by the drip of unseen water. Roots hung like entrails from the ceiling. The walls glistened with a sheen that looked too much like blood. Luke moved deeper, his footsteps hushed as breath. Then shapes stirred in the dark, a hiss of steam, and from the blackness, a figure emerged, tall, cloaked, its face masked in black iron, its breath rasping like death. Vader. Luke froze, his heart a drumbeat of terror. The figure advanced, crimson blade blooming with a hiss that split the silence like a scream. Luke's saber flared in answer, blue fire slashing through the dark. The clash shattered the stillness, sparks raining like dying stars. Blows fell like thunder, heavy and merciless. Luke parried, fear sharpening his reflexes, his breath ragged. Then an opening. His blade arced, cleaving through the dark figure's neck. The mask toppled, rolling across the wet stone with a hollow clang. Luke stared, chest heaving. And then the mask split open like a rotten fruit. Inside was not metal, not shadow, but a face, his own. The cave swallowed his scream. He stumbled out into the swamp, his skin clammy, his heart pounding. Yoda watched from the roots of an ancient tree, his eyes deep pools of sorrow. He said nothing. He didn't need to. Luke already knew. The enemy was not only out there, cloaked in black armor and hate. It was here, inside him, waiting. The training continued, but something had changed. Every lesson tasted of ash now. Every breath carried the stench of fate. Luke tried to bury the fear, but fear has roots, and roots run deep. Far away, aboard an Imperial Star Destroyer, slicing through the void, Darth Vader stood at the viewport, staring into a sea of stars. His hands, sheathed in black gauntlets, tightened behind his back. The Force trembled, whispering secrets, a presence, bright, fierce, familiar. His voice was a blade when he spoke. The Force is strong with this one. His thoughts coiled like smoke. Skywalker, the name returns to haunt me, and in the shadows of the Imperial throne, the Emperor smiled, his teeth like ivory knives. Chapter 16. I am your father. Cloud City floated in silence, a dream of steel, and light suspended in a sea of crimson clouds. The twin suns of Bespin sank into the horizon, bleeding fire into the sky, painting the gas giant in colors of death. Wind howled through hollow corridors, carrying whispers of betrayal, of footsteps that echoed too loud. Luke Skywalker walked those corridors now, his saber at his side, his breath quick and shallow, his heart a drumbeat in his ears. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the air itself sought to hold him back. He knew this was a trap. He had known from the moment the doors slid open and Vader's shadow fell across the light. But knowing changed nothing. Han was gone, dragged away in chains, his scream drowned in the roar of carbonite. Leia's eyes had burned with fury and something deeper warning, pleading. And Obi-Wan's voice haunted Luke still, whispering from the grave, "Do not underestimate the power of the dark side." But Luke could not turn away. Not now, not ever. The chamber waited like a mouth ready to swallow him. Vast and cavernous, lit by pools of orange fire, its heart was a narrow bridge stretching into emptiness. Pipes hissed like serpents, steam coiling from vents like ghosts, and there at the far end he stood. Darth Vader, a black tower of armor and hate, his crimson blade a wound of light in the gloom. His breath rasped in slow, inexorable rhythm, a sound that was not life, but the mockery of it. He turned as Luke entered, his voice a tolling bell. "The Force is with you, young Skywalker, but you are not a Jedi yet." The words curled like smoke around Luke's resolve. He ignited his saber with a snap hiss, its blue glow flaring against the dark. "You'll find I'm full of surprises," he said, though his voice trembled beneath the steel. And then the duel began. Vader struck first, his blade cleaving the air in a crimson arc. Luke parried, the clash splitting the silence like thunder. Sparks rained, hissing as they died on the metal floor. The Force rippled with every blow, each strike a note in a symphony of death. Vader pressed forward, relentless, his movements slow but inexorable, a tide that could not be turned. Luke gave ground, his breath ragged, sweat slicking his brow. He struck back, wild and desperate, his blade a streak of blue fire. But Vader caught each blow with contemptuous ease, his strength an ocean to Luke's stream. "You have learned much," Vader said, driving Luke back toward the chasm yawning beneath the bridge. "You'll find I'm full of surprises," Luke spat through gritted teeth, lunging forward. Their sabers locking in a storm of sparks. The heat seared his skin, his muscles screamed, and still Vader pressed, his voice cold as the void. "Your destiny lies with me, Skywalker." Obi-Wan knew this to be true. The name struck like a blade, ripping open old wounds. Rage flared in Luke, raw and blinding. He struck hard, forcing Vader back a step, then another. For an instant, hope flickered a fragile spark in the storm. But Vader's laughter shattered it, a sound like steel grinding on bone. He unleashed a torrent of blows, each heavier than the last, driving Luke to his knees. And then darkness surged, pipes burst. Steam screamed from shattered vents as Vader raised his hand, the Force twisting like a noose. Luke's body wrenched from the ground, hurled across the chamber to crash against the wall. Pain exploded through him. His saber skittered away, clattering into the void. He staggered to his feet, ribs screaming, vision swimming. Vader advanced, his blade humming with hunger. "You are beaten," he said, his voice a hammer pounding on the anvil of Luke's will. "It is useless to resist. Do not let yourself be destroyed as Obi-Wan did." His words coiled like serpents, hissing promises Luke refused to hear. He lashed out, grabbing a pipe, swinging with desperate fury. Vader shattered it with a flick of his wrist, his blade singing through the air. Luke dove, snatched his saber, and struck. Their blades locked again, sparks cascading like fiery rain. And then pain, white-hot, blinding. Vader's strike sheared through Luke's wrist, and his scream tore the sky as his hand spun into the abyss, his saber with it. He fell to his knees, clutching the stump, breath ragged, vision blurring. The wind howled through the chamber like a dirge. Vader loomed above him, a shadow blotting out the firelight, his saber poised like judgment, and then his voice, deep and terrible, yet almost gentle. There is no escape. Don't make me destroy you. Luke spat blood, his eyes blazing through the haze of pain. You killed my father. Vader's head tilted, the mask gleaming like a coffin lid. His voice dropped, soft as a blade sliding home. No, I am your father. The words fell like a star, exploding light and darkness all at once, tearing the galaxy apart. For a heartbeat, Luke could not breathe, could not think. The chamber spun, the air thick with the echo of that truth. No, his mind screamed it, his soul clawed against it, but the Force whispered otherwise. It whispered of blood and bonds, of destinies knotted in darkness. No, he gasped, his voice breaking. That's not true. That's impossible. Search your feelings, Vader said, his voice a black tide rising. You know it to be true, and Luke knew. In the marrow of his bones, he knew. The face behind the mask was not a stranger. It was his blood, his shadow, his doom. No. The scream ripped from his throat, raw and ragged, echoing through the void until it shattered into silence. Vader stepped closer, his blade dimming as he extended a hand black, gloved, inexorable. Join me, he said, his voice a velvet snare. Together, we can end this destructive conflict and bring order to the galaxy. Join me, and we can rule as father and son. The offer hung between them, heavy as a corpse. Power, unity, a throne built on stars. Luke stared at that outstretched hand, his body trembling, his soul bleeding. And for a moment, just a moment, he wavered. The abyss yawned behind him. The dark beckoned ahead. And then he chose. He turned. He leaped. The wind howled as he plunged into the void, the storm tearing at his flesh, the abyss swallowing his scream. He fell through smoke and steel, through the hollow veins of Cloud City, until a shaft of light caught him, cradling him in silence. He dangled there, broken, bleeding, his mind a shattered mirror. The truth gnawed at him, relentless. Father, the word tasted like poison, far above. Vader watched the void where his son had vanished, his hand lowered, slow as sorrow. His breath rasped, steady and hollow, but inside the furnace roared, not with victory, not with rage, but with something far more dangerous. Want. In the cold throne room of Coruscant, the Emperor smiled. He had felt it all, the clash, the wound, the scream that shook the stars. The pieces were moving. The endgame had begun. And somewhere, clinging to the Falcon's hull as the galaxy bled around him, Luke whispered into the storm, his voice a broken prayer. Ben, why didn't you tell me? The answer was silence. Chapter 17. The Throne. Of shadows, the throne room of the Death Star was a cathedral of night. Black columns clawed toward a ceiling lost in darkness, their surfaces slick with shadow. Lightning ripped across the void beyond vast windows, turning the stars into shattered glass. At the chamber's heart, a throne squatted like a spider, its master draped in robes darker than the abyss. His face was a ruin of age and power, skin etched with lines like cracked stone, eyes burning gold through the mask of decay. Emperor Palpatine waited there, his smile thin as a blade. Before him, 2 stormtroopers marched a prisoner into the chamber. Luke Skywalker, his hands bound in iron, his saber hanging from the Emperor's clawed fingers like a trophy. His face was pale but set, his jaw clenched, his blue eyes hard with a fire he did not yet understand. He walked in silence, his boots striking the polished floor with hollow echoes that seemed to mock him. Behind, the heavy breath of Darth Vader filled. The rumor sounded like chains dragged across stone. The Emperor rose, his voice a serpent's hiss, smooth as silk, sharp as venom. "Welcome, young Skywalker. I have been expecting you." His words slid across the air like oil, clinging, staining. Luke's shoulders stiffened, but he met that gaze without flinching. "You'll find I'm full of surprises," he said, though his voice trembled beneath the steel. The Emperor chuckled, low and cold, the sound slithering into Luke's bones. "You no longer need them. Soon you will call me Master." The word struck like ice. Luke swallowed it down, forcing strength into his limbs, but doubt gnawed. At the edges of his mind, he turned to Vader, searching for something: mercy, conflict, anything, but found only the mask, black and merciless, its gaze hidden behind twin abysses of glass. He could not read the man behind that mask. Perhaps there was no man left at all. Palpatine moved closer, each step a whisper of doom. "I can feel your anger," he said, circling Luke like a vulture around a dying beast. "It gives you focus. It makes you stronger." His voice curled like smoke, seeping into cracks Luke had not known were there. "Take your weapon, strike me down with all your hatred, and your journey to the dark side will be complete." He extended the saber, its hilt gleaming like a shard of midnight. Luke stared at it, his heart a drumbeat of fury and fear. He thought of Han, frozen in carbonite, Leia, shackled and defiant, the rebellion bleeding in the shadows, and beyond it all Vader, the father who had lied, betrayed, destroyed everything. His fingers twitched. Palpatine saw. His smile widened, a crescent moon of malice. "Yes," he whispered, soft as a lover's breath. "Feel it. Let the hate flow through you." The words sank like hooks into Luke's soul, dragging something black to the surface. He could feel it now, the anger boiling in his veins, hot and sweet, a fire promising to burn away weakness, fear, doubt. One stroke, one choice, and it would all end. The galaxy would be free. His friends would live. He would be strong enough to never lose again. His hand reached. The saber leaped into his grip with a hiss, its blade igniting in a blaze of emerald light. He spun, fury flooding every nerve, and brought it down in a killing arc only to meet crimson fire screaming upward. Vader, the blow shattered the air, sparks raining like dying stars. Palpatine's laughter pealed through the chamber, shrill and jagged, a hymn to ruin. "Good, good. Kill him. Take your place at my side." The duel erupted like a storm. Green and red clashed in blinding arcs, their song a symphony of rage and desperation. Luke fought with everything he had, each strike fueled by visions of chains shattered, friends saved, a galaxy redeemed. But beneath it all, another rhythm pulsed, a darker one, older and hungrier. Every blow tasted of hate, every parry a step closer to the abyss, and Vader felt it. He gave ground, letting the boy's fury swell, feeding it with the gravity of his own shadow. "You cannot hide. Forever, Luke," Vader's voice boomed, a furnace behind the mask. "Your thoughts betray you. Your feelings for your friends are strong, especially for your sister." His saber crashed against Luke's, driving him back, his words slicing deeper than any blade. So, you have a twin sister. Obi-Wan was wise to hide her from me. If you will not turn to the dark side, perhaps she will. The name tore through Luke like a thunderclap. Leia, her face flashed before him, fierce, defiant, unbroken. Vader's shadow falling over her like a plague. The image ignited something wild, something primal. A scream ripped from Luke's throat as he surged forward, his saber a green inferno. He hammered Vader with blow after blow, driving him back. Across the platform, their blades shrieking like demons in the dark. The mask loomed, cold and pitiless, and Luke struck harder, faster, until rage swallowed everything and his saber sheared. Through metal and flesh alike, Vader's scream tore the sky as his mechanical hand spun away, trailing sparks. He crumpled, kneeling in a pool of his own ruin, breath rasping like a broken bellows. Luke stood over him, chest heaving, saber blazing in his fist. The dark side roared in his blood, a tide surging to claim him. Palpatine's laughter split the chamber, a jagged crescendo of triumph. Yes, yes. Kill him, strike him down, and take your father's place at my side. The words coiled around Luke like chains of fire. His gaze dropped to Vader, broken, beaten, helpless. One stroke, that's all it would take. One stroke, and it would all end. The galaxy would bow. The war would be over. Power throbbed in his veins, intoxicating, absolute. He raised the blade, its green glow bathing his face in light that looked too much like shadow. And then he saw himself, not in glass, not in metal, but in memory, the cave on Dagobah. The mask splitting open, his own face staring back. The serpent coiled in his soul, hissing his name. He saw it all, the throne, the chains, the hollow eyes behind the mask. His future, his doom. No. The word ripped from his throat like a blade tearing free. He hurled the saber aside, its green fire dying with a hiss. His voice rose, raw and ragged, echoing through the chamber. Never, I'll never turn to the dark side. You failed, Your Highness. I am a Jedi like my father before me. For the first time, the Emperor's smile faltered. His eyes narrowed, golden flames flickering in the sockets of a skull. So be it, Jedi. The lightning came without warning. A storm of blue fire screamed from his fingers, raking across Luke's flesh, hurling him to the floor in a convulsion. Of agony, the scent of burning meat filled the air, mingling with Luke's screams. His body arched, twisted, every nerve a wire of molten pain. The Force shrieked around him, wild and broken. You will pay the price for your lack of vision. Palpatine roared, his laughter slicing through Luke's cries like glass. Bolt after bolt tore through him, each one shredding the fabric of his soul. He clawed at the floor, his voice raw. Father, please. And then Vader moved, slow at first, like a shadow stirring after centuries of sleep. His gaze lifted, the lenses of his mask reflecting the storm. Lightning danced across his armor, painting it in hellfire. Palpatine stood above them, a god of death, his laughter pealing through the void. And Vader looked at his son, broken, burning, begging. Something cracked in the furnace of his soul, something older than hate, older than pain, a memory, a name. Padme, her voice like rain on parched earth. There is still good in him. He rose. The Emperor did not see until the shadow fell across him. The lightning faltered as Vader's hands closed around his master's throat. Palpatine's scream ripped the stars as Vader lifted him high, the storm writhing between them. Lightning scorched his armor, crawling like white fire across his bones, searing flesh from steel. The stench of burning meat choked the air. But Vader did not stop. He staggered to the edge, his body a pillar of pain, and hurled the Emperor into the abyss. A sun of fire bloomed in the dark as Palpatine's scream faded to silence. The throne room lay in ruin. Smoke curled from shattered stone, the air thick with ozone and death. Vader collapsed, his breath a ragged rasp, his body broken beyond repair. Luke crawled to him, his limbs trembling, tears streaking his face. "Father," he whispered, the word tasting of blood and hope. "I'll get you out of here." Vader's head turned, the mask gleaming like a coffin. His voice came, soft and ruined, each word a dying ember. "Luke, help me, take this mask off, but you'll die." His breath rattled, a ghost. In the dark, nothing can stop that now, just for once. "Let me look on you with my own eyes." Luke's hands shook as he unlatched the seals. The mask fell away with a hiss, and for the first time he saw his father not a monster, not a machine, but a man, scarred, broken, eyes the color of dawn, clouded with pain yet bright with something purer than the stars. "Love, you were right," Anakin Skywalker whispered, his voice a thread unraveling in the wind. "You were right about me. Tell your sister you were right." His breath hitched, then stilled. The light in his eyes guttered out, leaving only silence. Luke held him as the Death Star groaned and burned, its heart imploding in fire. He carried his father's body through corridors collapsing into flame, onto the Falcon's ramp as the void roared behind them. And when the battle was done, when the Empire shattered like glass, he built a pyre beneath Ender's moon, its flames, licking the sky as if to cleanse the galaxy of all its ghosts. The prophecy was fulfilled, but not in triumph, in blood, in sacrifice. The Jedi were gone, the Sith were gone. Only the Force remained, vast and silent, watching, waiting for the next dreamer to awaken. Chapter 18. Balance in the burning. The night of Ender was alive with fire. Flames licked the sky, their tongues crackling against the canopy of stars. Smoke curled upward like ghosts fleeing the weight of mortality. Beneath the towering trees, the rebels sang and roared, their laughter crashing against the drums of victory. The Emperor was dead. The Death Star broken, devoured by its own rage, scattered as dust across the void. The galaxy breathed for the first time in a generation. Freedom burned bright, but not for Luke Skywalker. He stood apart from the revelry, the flicker of the bonfires dancing across his face, throwing shadows in the hollows of his eyes. In the clearing before him, a pyre blazed wood stacked high, fire gnawing at the figure laid upon it. Black armor, shattered and scorched, a mask, gleaming dully as flames caressed it. The shell of Darth Vader, the cage of Anakin Skywalker, and in its hollow heart, ashes whispered of redemption bought with blood. Luke's hands clenched at his sides, nails biting into flesh. The heat scalded his skin, but the cold inside him burned deeper. He had carried the body here himself, his muscles screaming beneath the weight, his soul screaming louder, not because of the burden, but because of what it meant. For all the galaxy's joy, for all the cheers that clawed at the night, Luke felt only silence. He remembered the last breath, the rasp of words torn from a throat ruined by years of darkness. "You were right, tell your sister. You were right." He remembered the eyes, pale and fading, yet bright with something fierce and fragile. Hope, love. He had seen the man behind the mask, and in that heartbeat he had found his father, only to lose him. The pyre crackled, spitting embers like dying stars. Luke's gaze lingered on the mask as flames consumed it, warping its cruel lines into molten ruin. Once, that mask had been terror incarnate, the face of nightmares whispered across 1,000 worlds. Now it was nothing. A husk, ash and smoke, and beneath it, bones. Always bones. The fire roared, a beast devouring a god, until there was nothing left but cinders and memory. Luke turned away, the weight of silence pressing on his chest. He walked into the forest, the bonfires dwindling behind him, the laughter fading like an echo of a life that was never his. The galaxy turns. The war ended in fire and song. The Emperor was dead. The Sith, gone ripped out by their roots, their poison burned from the veins of history. The Empire, headless, shattered like glass. Fleets scattered. Governors fled. Chains broke. Across 1,000 systems, slaves raised their eyes to skies no longer scarred by star destroyers. The people called it victory. The hollers blazed with light. Statues fell, their stone faces shattering under the boots of freedom. The new republic rose from the ashes, a phoenix with wings still wet, trembling with the weight of hope. But the galaxy is wide, and shadows linger in corners where light dares not crawl. Warlords carved empires from bone. Admirals clung to power with iron claws. Blades still whispered in alleys. Blood still stained the dust. And somewhere beyond the rim, in the black between stars, remnants of the dark dreamed of thrones yet to come. The last Jedi, Luke Skywalker, watched it all from a distance, the weight of victory heavy as chains. They called him hero, savior, the man who burned the Empire to ash. But Luke did not feel like a hero. He felt hollow. Every cheer sounded like a funeral bell. For what was victory but a graveyard paved with good intentions? He had seen what power did. He had tasted its edge. In that throne room, beneath the scream of lightning, he had felt the dark beckoner whisper, sweet as honey, promising an end to pain. And for a heartbeat he had almost listened. That truth gnawed at him like a worm in the marrow. How close he had come, how easy it had been. He wandered the forests that night, alone beneath the weight of stars, his thoughts bleeding into the silence. The Force whispered through the leaves, soft as a lover's breath, cold as a blade. It spoke of balance, of endings and beginnings, of cycles older than suns. The prophecy had been fulfilled. The Chosen One had brought balance, but not through light, not through darkness, through sacrifice, through fire. Anakin Skywalker was gone. Obi-Wan was gone. Yoda was gone. The Jedi were ghosts. Luke was the last dot, and in the marrow of his bones he knew this was not an ending. It was an echo. Shadows stir. Empires fall. Empires rise. The serpent coils. The tree bleeds. Always the Sparky returned to the clearing as dawn broke. The pyre nothing but ash. The air smelled of smoke and memory. Leia stood there, her eyes red but unbroken, the weight of royalty and rebellion heavy on her shoulders. She said nothing. She didn't need to. She stepped close, her hand finding his, fingers threading through his like roots seeking earth. For a moment they stood in silence, the ruins of one war behind them, the seeds of another already sprouting beneath the soil. Luke looked at her and saw strength. He saw hope, and something else, a thread of light winding through shadow. The force hummed around her, soft but sure, like the first breath of dawn. He squeezed her hand, his voice low, raw. He was our father. Leah's gaze held his, steady. As stone, he was your father, she said, but her voice trembled just a little. And that was enough. Balance in the burning night fell again, and the forest bloomed with fire. Not the fire of war, but the fire of celebration, a sea of light swaying beneath the trees as voices rose in ragged, joyous song. Ewoks danced, drums pounded. The stars wheeled above, cold and distant, their ancient light indifferent to the rise and fall of empires. But for a moment, just a moment, the galaxy felt whole. Luke stood at the edge of the firelight, the laughter washing over him like rain over stone. He lifted his eyes to the stars, and for an instant the shadows fell away. He saw faces in the light, Obi-Wan, Yoda, Anakin watching, silent, their eyes bright with something that might have been peace. His breath caught, a knot of grief and grace tightening in his chest. He nodded, a wordless promise, to build, to guard, to remember. The flames roared higher, sparks spiraling into the dark like souls taking flight. Balance had come, but balance is never still. It shifts, it tilts, it waits, and somewhere in that waiting, a whisper stirred a thread of shadow coiling through the song of the stars, soft as a blade sliding free. The story was over, but the story was not done.